What's up, world? I mix what I like right here at I Mix What I Like. Jared Ball, happy to be your host. A relatively quick, short video here, just looking at a lot of the news and the reports and the overlaps of buying power, boycott, and what I'd like to put forward in this video, the strike. I mix what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like, what I like. So, starting here with a legend of the black press, the Pittsburgh Courier, but with somewhat of an equally legendary poor approach to our understanding the economy, Dr. Julianne Malveaux back again with Are We Funding Our Own Oppression from the other day, March 1st of this year. I'll link again to our exchanges of the past, of the recent past, but Julianne Malveaux, Professor Malveaux, rather than following up on my invitation to check out my work and improve her understanding of this issue, she is continuing to double down on the mythology. And here, not even with the most updated number, which is of course now over 2.1 to 2.4 trillion according to Nielsen. But again, African Americans have about 1.6 trillion in buying power. Let's stop having that disrespected. There's nothing novel here about her argument. So I don't want to belabor the point before I get to what is for me the point here. But more importantly, she says African American people must use our dollars strategically, which is why I welcome Reverend Jamal Bryant's call that we fast from Target during Lent. Target was one of the first corporations to back off DEI, definitely earned it, or diversity, equity, and inclusion. Reverend Bryant has it right. Should we fund our own oppression by patronizing a company that has turned on us? So again, I would be fascinated to learn more about how people assess what companies have been good to Black people and why it was seen as of a couple of weeks ago that Target was good for Black people. And as Renee continues to show on Saturdays with Renee over there on Black Liberation Media, Target, the DEI equated to a 3% increase of Black representation on the board and represented a net decrease in overall Black hiring as a part of the labor force at Target. So these approaches are. But then it says here the fast or boycott will only be successful if the organizers cause Target pain. Bryant says Black folks spend $12 million a day at Target. Come back to that in a moment. Then Malveaux goes in and resuscitates again the same mythology around the boycott. Our most successful boycott was the Montgomery bus boycott. It worked not because the bus company yielded, but because they were losing money, about $30,000 a day in today's dollars, and more than $11 million during the 381-day boycott. At least she reminds us of that. But again, this was targeting one bus system in one municipality, and it was 381 days. Okay, so it was limited in its scope, limited in what was accumulated. And again, it was the begin. This is the point I was raising the other day. So much of the activists of today are including these forms of historical remembrances, are encouraging that we go back to the beginning of the civil rights movement. Again, the Montgomery bus boycott was the beginning, and we're being asked to go back to the very beginning as opposed to where the movement had itself already evolved. But the real thing that got me most interested in saying something about this is this part here, that there have been other boycotts where oppressive owners have capitulated to popular demands. For example, the United Farm Workers grape boycott lasted more than 5 years, but ended up with major concessions, including union recognition and higher pay for migrant farm workers. There have also been successful divestment campaigns, notably against South Africa, the apartheid regime. Thanks to activists like Randall Robinson and Dr. Francis Berry, South Africa was forced to release Nelson Mandela from his long imprisonment and back down from apartheid. So again, that's the history here is wrong. To say that South Africa ended apartheid because of the boycotts, and to disrespect the internal struggles, including the armed struggle, to disrespect Nelson Mandela's, as he says in his own autobiography, more or less a capitulation to abandon violence and be released, to ignore the fact that Chris Hani had to be sacrificed, to ignore the fact that Winnie Mandela had to be marginalized, to ignore the fact that people in the townships continue to this day to complain, and some argue that things have not changed. And to this day, 7% of the population that's white owns 77% of the land there. If we look, what are the conditions of migrant workers today? Are we advocating that something had been overcome here? Or are we just simply saying to go back to the "Don't Buy Where You Can't Work" campaign, which Abram Harris, as I have shown, and Marissa Baradaran and Nathan Connolly Jr. put me on 2 years ago, have shown that Abram Harris had already exposed this 100 years ago, literally 90 years ago. So we're being asked to go back past all of the struggles, back to something that has already been debunked and shown to be insufficient in its scope. But let's take a quick look at this other example that she mentions, the United Farm Workers strike of 1965 to 70, the grape strike. First of all, even as the title says here, strike and boycott. So Professor Malveaux left it in the context of there just having been a boycott. See how she describes it here? That there were other boycotts that were successful. The United Farm Worker Grape Boycott lasted for 5 years. No mention of the word strike. And I think this is important because, again, as pointed out by Renee on Saturdays with Renee over there on Black Liberation Media, by advocating that people boycott into to Costco, we are being invited to support the abuse of potentially striking workers there. And we're being encouraged away from a broader labor movement that should be challenging all of these relationships. By ignoring the fact that this was a strike, that on September 8th, 1965, Filipino American grape workers, members of the Agricultural Workers Organizing Committee, walked out on strike against Delano area table and wine grape owners. So Malveaux and others having these conversations about boycotts and boycotts are leaving out unionization. And when making these examples referencing something like the grape strike, they're leaving out the organizational work that happened. They're leaving out the fact that it was a strike, not a boycott. Or, as it says here, later the strikes turned into boycotts, including table grapes, which eventually spread across America. So, as it says here, the strikers had to be prepared to risk everything, beginning with their financial security. They asked other people to boycott the product they were striking from to support their strike. So again, Malveaux is leaving out these very important bits of history here when making these false comparisons, suggesting that the boycott is more radical than it is, suggesting that, and then again, leaving out all the context that would make a boycott radical, that is, being connected to strikes, unionized labor, and other forms of organization, including Cesar Chavez's engagement with Dr. King's version of militant nonviolence. By 1970, the Grape Boycott was a complete success. Table grape owners at long last signed their first union contracts, granting workers better pay, benefits, and protection. So let's just, without even questioning the conditions they're in today, look at the standard and look at what was being called for here. Not some vacuous reference to symbolic inclusion through DEI, but meaningful contracts, better pay, benefits, worker protection. So we're not even being encouraged to advocate for that. Now, as I mentioned, I would come back to this. Malveaux references Jamal Bryant's claim that $12 million a day is being spent by Black people in Target. And I just want to show you that when you click on that website and go to Target Fast, click on that link in Malveaux's story and go to targetfast.org, all of this will be linked in the show description. You can see a little bit of how this is going. The ticker claiming we're calling for us to boycott. Now, it's not saying to boycott John Deere because they've been bulldozing Palestinian homes, but they're saying, so boycott all of these stores. And again, this is for Lent. This is for Lent. So coming up here in a couple of days. Now, what does it say? First time ever, see the Black spending power in real time. Watch the Black Wall Street ticker. Track our collective dollars as we shift the economy. Now, I did this. I signed up for the voter wallet, and just to see what you're being asked to do. And you're basically, and all it is you click this, and their methodology is everybody self-report. You sign up for an account, you tell people where you're spending, you tell them through the website where you've spent or where you're not spending, where you intend to spend versus where you have been spending. And it's a self-reported thing, which is perfect because, as again, they claim here that Black America is the world's 12th wealthiest nation in spending power. So they're regurgitating the mythology around spending power or buying power, regurgitating it again, connecting it to some sort of national strength without checking the fact that it's based on spurious methods to reach these conclusions. So here the argument that through self-reporting it could be said that we're spending or black people are spending $12 million a day at Target. It sounds like a lot, but I don't know to what extent you can verify that because again, this methodology leaves a lot to be desired. They're going to feature the black vendors from Target. They're going to encourage people to spend their money over with the 300 black owned businesses, circulate our dollars and support our entrepreneurs. So this is just again similar to what we were saying about the Miss Brown, uh, Tabitha, right? Uh, Black entrepreneurs, this becomes a class divisive issue because the black bourgeoisie is saying, don't join the labor movement, don't fight for contracts and go on strike and do all of that. They're saying just simply shift your money over to black banks, black businesses. They're using the picture of Frederick Douglass here as a symbol of black banks, as opposed to a symbol of what actually happened to black banks. But that's what it's saying. The four demands of Target: honor the $2 billion pledge of the black business community through products, services, and black media buys. Okay, so all of this benefits the black entrepreneurial class and the black commercial media class. Deposit 250 million amongst any of our 23 black banks. So it's a cash grab. it's a, it's holding its ransom. 250 million across 23 black banks. How would that benefit anyone? To what end would that money be put? How is that going to be? How does that translate to benefiting people who are already depositors, perhaps in those banks? Completely restoring the franchise commitment to DEI. Again, we've already shown what that is and is not. Pipeline community centers at 10 HBCU to teach retail business at every level. So I don't know. This is a oddly phrased, frame written sentence, but I guess we're just give money to black colleges and universities and to it sounds like the business schools to teach more entrepreneurialism. And then it says, where do we go from here? The target fast will take place March 5th through April 17th, and then we will collect data on its impact and attempt to meet with the target board to assess whether we will proceed to phase two. I went to look back at this book again, Lawrence Glickman's Buying Power: A History of Consumer Activism in America. And it does sort of, in a broader historical scale, what Malveaux did in miniature. It overemphasizes the value of boycotts, absent a proper emphasis on labor unions, organized labor, and strikes. And defines buying power along the more mythological form, not explaining at all what I've tried to do to explain what it actually means, but to suggest that there is a strong consumer activist tradition in the United States. Among the few things that I think are at least valuable in the book are, so for instance, when Glickman talks about this consumer activist tradition, he's not just talking about some efforts among the left to help benefit working people, certainly not black people. For instance, in his chapter For the Sake of the Slave, Glickman also writes, free produce advocates called upon the abolitionists to eschew goods made by slave labor and alternatively to purchase only free labor produce made by non-slave workers. White Southern advocates of non-intercourse use precisely the same methods, the boycott and boycott, and very similar rhetoric for the exact opposite cause: the maintenance of a slave labor economy and the weakening of the free labor North. So the question I asked myself in the margins here is, well, one, saying only a organized broad effort can counterbalance their more resourced use of the same tactics. So same kind of thing, whether we're using media or any other form of or anything else in the arsenal of liberation, we have to understand that if we're not doing it in an organized fashion connected to more broad and organized radical efforts, we're not competing. We're not even counterbalancing what. But the point being that the boycott and the boycott has been used for any number of different things. And as the book says here, consumer activism has had an enduring, if sometimes uneasy, affiliation with liberalism, which is not coincidentally a political tradition as longstanding, capacious, and protein as consumer activism itself. In the 18th century, liberals promoted a new conception of economic virtue, challenging Republican suspicions of commerce. In the 19th century, liberals stood for a belief in the liberating power of markets and the social consequences of seemingly private economic activities. At the same time as liberalism separated itself from radicalism in the post World War II years,
Message!
liberal consumer groups define themselves less as radical consumer activists than as reforming consumer advocates, whose chief function was to lobby for laws and business practices that would be favorable to the consumer interest. And by the way, he does the same thing here. Talk about the United Farm Workers grape boycott, leaving out the part that they went on strike first and then engaged, encouraging others to support that strike through a boycott. Just another relatively quick look at the ways radical history is being redefined and rebranded as radical by the most liberal and with the most liberal activity, most of which only benefits, in this specific case, the Black business community, the Black commercial press, the Black bourgeoisie, if that.